don't be upset and don't blame anyone when you find yourself cut off, because no one can cut you off but you. You flip the switch. So I want everyone to know that before I explain what I'm about to explain, for you feel like that these archons and all the rest of the names that you can give for them are so heavy that they're weighing you down. Because when you stop thinking that you're in debt to them and that you got to serve them, people are so in the brainwash service program. I get emails from people that have been reading knowledge for 4 or 5 years that we've been producing, still trying to associate with some name or something that they can say has power and that is now them.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing, is like it's just trying to take over your consciousness and take your power anyway. And the smarter you get, the smarter it gets, because you're expanding, right? And so this also shows us that whatever it is, it will always live within us. It's about whether we can contain it, whether it actually is put in its proper place, whether it's being, you know how you see someone that has all these powers and abilities. This is Hermes' motif. It's the same as Loki's. All this power, all this intelligence, all this ability, but doing dumb stuff. That's why you notice in Hollywood, the jokers suffer the worst. The comedians suffer the worst. Even there's a sect of the masonry that's the court of the jesters. They suffered the worst. Even with the king, who's next to him? The jester. Even in the card, the joker is the card that trumps all of the cards, but something's wrong with the joker. You can look at that and tell. Look what happened to Heath Ledger. So these are real things. Anytime you can map it in the reality to be occurring, you can find the correspondence to it through the occult. Sorcerers are jokers. They're jesters. So what happened? They first started doing fake tricks to try to get people to believe that they had power. And this comes from people's incessant greed in wanting favoritism, long life, and prosperity when that's already promised to you. You don't have to engage that. That's your allotment. You don't need to confirm something that you already have, right? But notice how all the cultures are rife with trinkets and all sorts of little bags and plants and all these different things that are supposed to give you long life, prosperity, etc., but not ingested, but just some carved out symbol. This is the corruption of the mind as it begins to lean on other things. So now all of a sudden, a twig or a branch becomes more powerful than a rainbow bridge. Where does that happen? Not to mention, if we start to believe that this little tree, this little branch, this little symbol has so much power, if somehow we're without it one day, oh my goodness, that means we're doomed, right? Just like that's how they played out their lost word scenario. They had the word to create everything and then they lost it. How stupid. You would think you would have kept that as if anything else, right? So just notice the game that's being played. So all these different trinkets and things left man wide open for the sorcerers. Sorcerers come using science. These are even these words today you can find in the organization, the Code of Zion. Even right now, like I have bought this device called the SIO, which is a handheld molecular scanner, and they just came under a class action lawsuit because of using that word. And then they brought up that word, and this is an Israeli company, is used within so many other corporations. They were wondering why they're being sued for it. But SIO and Scion is actually the root to the word of 2012 and the period in which that we will go through the emulation and the creation of a new world. Now we have to ask that ourselves then, are we going to be immersed into this new world, body of Christ, masculine, homogenous, whatever they got going on? Or are we going to finally go into the level that we're supposed to be with a world that is completely combined, where everyone gets to experience and express their uniqueness? So here it is. Sorcerers look for individuals like kings or people of divine lineage to try to tuck themselves under, show a few tricks to, and then get that king corrupted into the idea that through the use of this kind of power, which could even be explosives and fireworks, that they can control everything. This is the Jafar in the Aladdin, you know, for Disney speak. Okay, yeah. So these sorcerers were all over the place, and a few of them are Apollonius of Tyana, which was a member of the cult of Apollo. So there was more Apolloniuses. This was Pythagoras, which of course is the headmaster of the Pythagorean Lodge, which encompassed Plato, Socrates, and all the rest of the guys of those days. There was Simon Magus, or Bar Magus, the magician, who even attempted to buy Abraxas or Oannes' power from him. And you see him coming through the Bible. See, only when you know this stuff, only when you live this, can you ever realize what's going on. And then, or if you're guided. So anyone who actually hears a conversation, you get the knowledge. That's called those of the guided. That means they don't have to go and dig all night or run through some church and, had something come out of the wall and all that to finally know this, because will you even make it through all of that? But I'm telling you, I know this because I experienced it firsthand. And people who have met me to know what I've been involved with in attends to what I've went through, they say they've never seen anyone come out from that like this, with a family, with kids, with trying to help people. But I came out because that's in my core. I don't like favoritism. I don't like when one person sets themselves up over another, and I always go and root for the underdog. That's just who I am. And so when I came into spirituality, I'm a savant. Everything that I study and I learned throughout my life, I mastered. So when spirituality got in front of me, I found myself quite up for the task, but quite overwhelmed about how many different integers were contained in spirituality. I mean, stuff was going everywhere. Not to mention, I had a spiritual past, so I had a lot of residue and other stuff to deal with, stuff that's trying to get me to judge things one way. So again, nobody makes it out generally. So I'm only rendering the formula, because people need to understand that if you can say, I'll give you a simple example. If you can say that, let's say, for instance, martial arts, and the art of martial arts primarily comes from Asia, hence jujitsu, karate, etc. If you can say that, then if a person wants to study the deepest art of martial arts, they're probably going to go to Asia. What I'm telling you is that the melanin-dominant people of this planet, many of them had as custodial jobs and purposes to manage the spiritual world, just like someone would do martial arts. And the reason for that is that we all had a unique power and ability. And for us, we're not scared of all of this stuff. And I'm not saying it's specific to one color, because this is something that exists within inside of you. See, we keep looking at these outside colors, and you would be surprised when you're on the diamond, or you got the third eye open, you look at somebody, it looks like the face of the Keanu Reeves on a scanner darkly. When the face is just morphing into all these different characters, and you're like, man, and then, the ones that are paranoid, am I in front of a shapeshifter? The reality is that what exists within a person, if you're a seer, you can see all of their bloodline. And because every single thing goes back to the same source, then you can see everything. So, you see what I mean? And so, but what governs what we see? Our judgments.
Yeah.
Our judgments. So that tells us, like I said, the thalamus operates on our judgments and determines what we can and cannot see by our own orders. There's no laws being broke here then. So if we agree to something and we didn't know what we agreed to, that's our bad. And I find that many people in this world have agreed to things that I know directly result in them not being able to awake. They may think they're awake. Because a person that's brainwashed and mind controlled doesn't know they're brainwashed and mind controlled, silly. That's the whole purpose of brainwash and mind control. The host is never to know. So you just have to assume, like, there's a way to operate under the assumption that you've been brainwashed and mind controlled, and then start going back over everything that you think you believe, and then setting up a blueprint or a system to be able to determine and define what it really is. And then what you're left to deal with after that is the ability to make the decision. And that's the decision. That's the difference between neophytes and adepts. Meaning a boy or a girl will sit there all day knowing that there's a decision that they need to make and will not make that decision, even if it's to the detriment and destruction of everything around them, versus an adept will make that decision right away. And this is for people who want that in relationship or emotional speak. If there's somebody that you're with and you know that you're not supposed to be with them, then why are you still with them after 5 or 10 years? That's how that operates. It's like you get so many things. Well, maybe it'll get better. Or, well, there's nobody else out there for me. Or, well, I'm working on something else right now, so it's something I don't really need to confront. Or, well, they did apologize. Or maybe I expect too much. Or they said that we actually give ourselves 1,000 different reasons within 10 seconds. That's how powerful the mind is. That if we don't make the decision to do something right away, we've already given ourselves within 10 seconds 1,000 reasons on why you do not want to do it. So what I'm about to tell you is going to now make more sense because it explains to you exactly how the mind operates with actually believing any of this stuff. So through this idea of the trinkets, the sorcerers move themselves in. Now, science produced some rather strange phenomena. For anyone, like imagine the king. The king is just like any kid that's got all this damn money that they never even leave out of the palace without an extreme retinue and guard and everybody watching what they do. Versus the kid that's the pauper, like Aladdin was, born in the streets, knows more about life and what to really do and how to survive than the king ever will. Am I right or am I wrong? So the truth is that the king never was really the person that had all this knowledge and wisdom. That's the truth. So what you dealt with was when the sorcerers came on them, they were like overwhelmed. Sorcerers move with a different kind of power that the king was not familiar with. The kings were the responsible for overthrowing the matriarchal system that had everything in check. That's when the masculines move in and dominate. But then they were no match for the sorcerers because the matriarchal clans were handling the sorcerers. The priestesses were handling these sorcerers with no problem. See, I'm just giving you a little foreground of what went on in history. So that's how you saw large groups of people, leaders, countries, be overthrown step by step by step as it is being done today. So in the midst of it, though, was just that idea that I could become the conqueror of the world. And someone feeding that idea to you. So you had it move from the Chaldean magic first. Okay? Chaldean magic is the strongest form of magic. It's Sumerian. Sumeria is Chaldea. This is the birth and the root of the cult of the worship of a male, Tammuz and Damuzi. So then it moves from there into the Yazidis. I'm somewhat giving a chronological order. This is the Iranians that found the books and found the doctrines of practicing the magic from the Sumerians, which actually starts digging into necromancy. That the only way to actually bring a male back into the world without sending him through the womb is you have to raise him from the dead. Hello, that's Christianity. He raises from the dead. He's not even born of a woman. She's a virgin. See, we have to understand what are these people playing around with? I feel like I'm in a world where I'm somewhat one of the only people that know what the hell is going on just by critical thinking. If anyone believes this kind of story, and you got millions of people believing this kind of story, and we reverse engineer it, what are these people thinking? What are they really like under that skin? So what we find is that this dominant male undead god as king becomes the actual religion that everyone starts to gravitate towards through this idea that man needs to be everyone's god. This goes out in the Bible as Saul, which means salt, which is Saturn, which is the cube, gets elected as king over the Israelites. But before, they were constantly being told that, hey, you guys don't need a king. You don't need a king. And so this plays out. So remember, all this stuff about the 12 tribes of Israel, this is all zodiacal codes for MEs that are embedded into humans' minds. 12 tribes is obviously 12 signs of the zodiac. The 12 signs of the zodiac are the archons because they're the animalistic forces used to create a person's urges. Those urges act out in zoomorphication and can be written in writing called hieroglyphics. In the event that you write the words in the proper order in the sequence, you've put out the alchemical formula in order to create life. Done. Okay? And life comes from fragments of the soul, which can't be identified. And it can't be identified, and we should be glad, because if we could identify it, we would become disenchanted with it. Thus, there would be no way out. So, because we still realize we have a soul, and we want to really deal with that now, we're now ready to conquer these sorcerers. So, just a little backstory of what they've done. So, through the crazy Arab known as Abdul has read, he brings the Necronomicon, which was the book chained down to the floor in the vault of the bottom of the pyramid. He brings the Necronomicon to what we would know today as the Osirian cult, which are the Hyksos kings, greedy and ready to do whatever. They've just overthrown Egypt, which was Kemet then. And now their Necro army, which is something like what you would see in the movie Pitch Black with Vin Diesel, starts to move throughout the world as the Osirian cult, replacing all matriarchal traditions with patriarchal traditions. You get Muhammad, you get Christ, you get Buddha, you get all these males, but before all these were priestesses. The temples were only for pleasure and abundance. Tell you the truth, those are the kind of worlds I'm living in. If you guys like this, y'all can hang here. I'm going back to that then at least. Because I'd much rather deal with abundance and pleasure than scarcity, greed, hatred, jealousy, etc., which is the embodiment of the idea of this particular being, which you can read enough of in the Old Testament. If you just see how it really is, to chop off the heads of the firstborn and to kill other species and tribes just because they're not like you, you got a real issue. It's best if you're God to just get off the planet and go and build your own shit. Think about it. None of this shit makes sense. Excuse my language. If I'm the God and I created worlds and beings that I don't like, I'm a dip. Go create me another world, let them hang out there, and I'm done. So why is it so hard for a God, if they have all this power, to just go and do something else? Why do they have to mess around with people who don't even have the power to overcome them? Yeah. Because that's what's clearly written, that these people don't even have power to overcome this thing. It's coming with like a nuclear bomb that people are carrying with two death angels on top of it. I mean, what are we dealing with here? You see, but this is our history, but this is why when we're cut off, we don't know it. When we turn back on, which people call activated, then all this stuff starts coming in like a floodgate. And you start trying to figure out how you're going to interpret even what I just said from when you're seeing that visually into something called English, which is like, already doomed you before you gotten started. So we see that we swam a long way. Instead of just having that 26 characters, we found this other 26. That gave us 52. That's the deck of the tarot. That's Egyptian, also known as a gypsy. See, gypsies use tarot. Tarot, the one that the English system is on, is 52 cards. 52 cards come out 52 weeks a year. This is a solar year for a solar god. This is not a lunar year for a lunar, abundant, pleasureful place that's running on magnet. This is the stress and the strife and the hissing and spitting and the serpent-like poison of electricity. You see what I mean? Powered by oil, which is blood money and blood energy, right? Like, think about this. This plastic and stuff. This is like blood diamonds all around us, because they got this stuff from destroying and pillaging not only our planet, but also the people who were standing on the ground that felt that they were standing on the ground, that they felt that they were so cursed by being on. This is the tribe of Ham. They felt that because they were given the deserts that they were cursed when the allotments of the land went out. But then when they found that the oil was in the ground, they exacted retribution upon their brothers and sisters for leaving them in the land of the desert, which is where you find the genies and the jinn, right? So through that same Chaldean genie jinn magic, we're sitting here trying to figure out how we're going to get out of this bottle, right? Because now they started working the necromancy, and you know that because OTO and the Golden Dawn is rife with it. But even before then, the Osirian cults had passed it on to the Hyksos kings, and the Hyksos kings started spreading through the world under the symbol known as Abraxas, 365, which gives us 365 days of the year, and 5 gods that sit on the point of the pentagram in order to torture every single spirit that ever gets binded in a pentagram 5-base body. Then the knowledge continues from there and is passed on to whoever it is that's going to be the next accursed people. Because to get this, that's why they call, they're the chosen people, meaning you've been chosen for the burden. See, when those people that we're seeing right now in Israel picked up that damn box and carried it out of Egypt, they now know they should have left it there. This thing does not play, and it's tearing them up. The thing is that the Merovingians, which they became later, that's who you see on the Matrix, the French, because they took the knowledge from the Moroccans, which were actually taking the knowledge of the Arab Muhammad. Now, if we, for the Muslim people, if you want to feel a little bit better, I'm not talking about the Muhammad that everyone's praying to now, okay? Or maybe I am. Because how many times can you go into Israel, or excuse me, even in Israel, Palestine, Pakistan, anywhere over there and ask for Muhammad, and not have to at least go through at least 3,000 or 4,000 people? You cannot go over there and ask for Muhammad and expect that that's one person's name. But it looks like that the cult of Baphomet is the cult of Muhammad. And what it contains is all the knowledge that Abdul al-Azred had, the real Necronomicon, and what they were doing in that cube or that box, which is basically a portal from the 4th dimension back into the 3rd dimension. And it runs itself because, see, people don't understand. It all connects on the back end. None of this stuff is hocus pocus. To run a portal, it needs a power supply. The power supply must circumambulate like a generator. So all those people marching around the Kaaba become the power for the portal so that they can keep coming in and out of the world from death to rebirth, again, as if they're being baptized in the 4th dimension and then rising back out of the mouth of it, which is coming out of the snake. as they call it. So Abraxas, which is the chicken head god, 365, aka Jesus. It is the most powerful symbol in Budun, and it is used still, Jesus' name right now, because it is known by anyone who practices spirituality that Jesus is the strongest demon in hell. So every time a person prays for nefarious and materialistic things, they generally evoke demons because they're the only ones that get into that kind of stuff. Yet they don't know. If you want a car so you can be in debt to Knights Templar and their temple, which is their bank, that's why it shows you when Yeshua came through, they had made the temple their bank. Think about what's being said. When the Messiahs, which is anyone who comes in, is like, hey, I don't think we're supposed to be doing this, comes in, the temple, which is the place of worship, actually was synonymous with the bank and where money was traded. What's being given right then is the hint that the Knights Templar were the ones that were actually conducting and funding the cult of Jesus and funding all of the cults from since day one coming out of Chaldea. Right? They're getting the knowledge here on OpThink today. As we keep going with this, we find that the Merovingians then decide that they're going to disperse this knowledge under the term of Hermeticism and Gnosticism, which is actually ophilatria. It's the worship of the snake, more specifically one snake known as Set. So as they get it, it continues to ravage them. Now they got these ideas of that they're going to actually, and all the time, remember, all the time they're pillaging the divine feminine. They're taking the knowledge and they're turning it upside down. Every single thing that they're grabbing from the truth, they're turning it around into their falsehood. Hermeticism is born, Gnosticism is born, and then all the different practices of Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and ophilatria are rife throughout the land. This despoils the people. And then at a certain point, the knowledge makes it in, because as it's spreading through the world like a plague. See, this is what you're looking at. It's what they call the Black Plague. And it's spreading through all the people, and they're becoming infected by this idea and this belief system that something is king over them. So then it passes to the Cathars. The Cathars give it to the Catholics, or who are the Jesuits, and they're really the same. The Catholics and the Jesuits get it. And then through that, because this being is moving on a hyperdimensional level, the Catholics never see it coming. They got entire Orthodox Christianity in their own selfishness to create a God. See, they wanted, the Catholics who were the Greeks, they wanted to make a God so bad and just to make the whole world worship their God. And they thought that idea was unique to them. See, what you're watching is how the world is toppled, because each of the groups that I just explained to you are actually on the key ley lines of the entire world. And something is coming to them at the same time, telling them that they're the ones that are going to rule everything. How are you going to tell 7 people that they're going to be the one that's the ruler? So this is what happened to the kings. All their minds was poisoned at the same time by a hyperdimensional entity, because it exists outside of time. I ID this as Osiris or Orion somehow has something to do with it. I'm not saying it's them directly, but they would know. So what happens is that this knowledge then, as the Cathars, the Catholics, now the Jesuits, they got their thing going on. They've built this sanctimonious kingdom that they've of all white, and then where any punishments or sins or anything that has to do with female that's done, one should be punished by it. There's no partying. There's no nothing. There's no pleasure. You see what I mean? So they're killing everything around them. This is written in the fable tales of when Venus pulls her energy from the earth and then everything starts dying because it won't copulate. This is because the Cathars issued a bull or decree throughout the land in order for everyone to basically be like Mormons, that there would no longer be any more sex, because they had gotten to the idea that woman was the creation of evil, and that by coming through her womb, we were putting our own selves back into the realm of a life eater. You see, and that same stigma that they created within their own mind actually wasn't a creation, but comes from what Jung explained with their hardships with being in the Caucasus Mountains and living in caves and having to deal with elements that were very disastrous for them, meaning the acts of God, as they call it now, meaning when weather turns against you as a person, when animals and beasts, which are intrepid, like you're not going to be out there with a saber-toothed tiger and a warm baby inside of a cave at night and expect for some to wake up and maybe you and the baby are dead. So you see, when you go into history and you go into the minds of the ancestors, you realize their plight. And only then can you have compassion. So you're not looking at it as, oh, that's another white person, or that's another black person, or all these Chinese, and they're taking all the jobs. And you're not looking at that anymore. You're just crying. because the pain and the sorrow of when we're disconnected. And only when we come together can we sustain ourselves. And that's our lesson. And the university, which is the universe, has no problem with teaching us. It does not have feelings like we think it does. It has a positive and a negative and a neutral. And it operates as if it's a machine, keeping those three in balance. Not good, not bad, and not balanced, but all three. That's what creates a cosmos. That's why I said when looking into it, when staring into the eye or using the eye of the cosmos to stare into life, you realize the level of sentience. And it's awestruck. You're awestruck. And at any point when you ask a question about this minute situation that we're dealing with on earth, you pierce it like laser. This is what the term Lazarus was, to raise one from the dead. Meaning you come back with so much power and truth and light and energy, you can raise the dead. And that's not the same as the necromancy that they're utilizing, which is ripping people through dimensions. You see? But we don't have time to talk about that. So the Catholics weren't prepared for what the Knights Templar had done. See, the Knights Templar were already so steeped headlong into the buffoonery of wickedness that they had already enslaved all the people in their whole land. They were the feudal lords. Because see, remember when we read about the time of the feudal lords and the serfdoms and these empires that are basically taken over by warlike clans? The warlike clans were the embodiment of the distorted masculine. And it infected the Aztecs. It infected, you look in the books, you'll see it infected all the people. And it was the same thing, but it was happening on two different sides of the world in two what would appear to be different ways. But when it met head to head, surely the warlike clans had delved into much more darkness than the Jesuits had with their genie-based magic. And so what happened was that the Knights Templar had already been taking in the relics. Whoever their leader is and was pulling all the relics that people had been worshiping and practicing with and accumulating those relics. So by the time that the Jesuits were dealing with the Knights Templar, they immediately came under an agreement to allow the Knights Templar to begin to charge interest. Okay? So nobody could do that back then. Even to this day in Islam, it is illegal to charge someone interest. Look into Hadith. So the Catholic Church was the same way, and Orthodox Christianity was the same way. You couldn't charge interest because everyone knew that if you charge interest, you would enter Set. Set would come because Set never allows you to be free because you'll always be in debt. How can you make more money unless you've taken it from another person to pay back your interest? Yeah. So it starts a chain reaction that can't be stopped until everyone puts the brakes on it at the same time. So what happens is the Knights Templar, they're infested with this. It's controlling them. See, this entity specifically, which we've been IDing across multiple realms, when it enters into one, it does not just stay in that one. It can enter into thousands, 2,000s. It's that expanded as far as where it's at. So you could have 20, 30, 40, 100 men all possessed by one entity. And that's how this entity generally moves. So it had completely infected the Knights Templar. They built Chateau Rajan or Ralan or whatever it's called, which it's the crypt. It contains all of the essence of the entity that they're worshiping and all the symbolism. Everyone has already most people have done their research on that, but that's just to understand what they were up to. So now they got this interest, and now they also got something else. Sheep. They have good, soft meat. And these are all these new, naive Orthodox Christians that have just been converted to Christianity and given a story that's not actually true to form. In fact, a lot of writings are starting to come up about this individual who was really who they casting as the person Jesus. And none of the whole being worshiped, even dying on the cross, none of that even took place. So what we're seeing is that these people, because if you've ever looked into the eyes of a Jehovah's Witness, if you've ever looked into the eyes of a Mormon, you see such a level of purity. It's so difficult for you to associate that at all with being a part of some kind of diabolical plot or scheme. And the reason is it's more of like food for the diabolical plot or scheme that has been completely manipulated by just basic things of having a husband. See, when people are put into a feminine or receptive kind of status because they don't know where their power is and they're depending on something, then when something's strong, the king, I'm the king, I'm going to protect you. All the kings had the same story. We're going to protect your kingdom from all the vile nastiness and craziness that goes out there. And for that, you're going to give us your taxes. And your taxes could be your children. It's just like the military contract. We own your children. We own your life for the next 10 years. We own that's what those contracts say. Right now, it's not symbolic. Wake up, people. They say all your property belongs to us for this particular term. So anyway, so that's what was going on. And we see it even in our world today. There's few left that it hasn't happened to. And the Knights Templar were so instrumental in doing this because they had these people that were so naive under their control. And the Knights Templar were seen almost like what we would look at the X-Men today, except for they were really running around. This was a band of warrior monks that seemed to possess some kind of extraterrestrial power through these relics. And you even find them riding around in paintings today with different relics that had different power, different scientific objects, like they told you in the book Bishop Kenko and the worship of, oh man, it's just Google Bishop Kenko. But anyway, where this entity lives is also in somewhere in the sea, and in the sea was being produced all of what we see today as technology. So what I'm saying is as a Time Lord, you have access to the entire loop. So it's obviously if this thing, which could be Akhenaten or anything for that matter, has knowledge of the future, then it has knowledge of technology from the future. So telling somebody that serves it or giving somebody that serves it one of these pieces of technology to do something to groups of people that are way behind in technology to cause some kind of phenomena that God has power. Right? Because think about most of the people that you're reading about in these books and cultures, some kind of phenomena happens and then they're just like awestruck by God's power. And we covered that before about God is a weapon when we revealed that the true weapon that we have in this world, which we're calling God, is a nuclear weapon that we threaten other people with as a country. And if they don't do what we tell them to do, then we drop the weapon. That's the God that they trust. And that's why the weapon was created from the reverse engineering of the Upanishads when it explains how to make a Vimana Shastra or how to meditate and make yourself implode, which is the beginning of meditation. And then that knowledge is taken and then reversed and an explosion is created. That explosion becomes splitting of Adam. Adam, of course, being the first man, which is androgen. Adam is then split. Now two are there. We call them male and female. Yeah. And then from there, through their conflicts, more energy is created to drive the chariot of this beast. So at this point, I'm not pulling the chariot. I've been pulling the chariot for 8, 9, 10 years. I suggest we stop pulling the chariot. Surely what could happen after that will not be worse than what's already happening now, seeing that our children are being hijacked. Our children are lost. We can watch them right now. Like, forget our children. We're kind of lost. Yeah. Grandma's lost. Granddad, our mother, our father, they're lost. So it's not exclusive. We're not blaming anyone for this. I'm just saying, if you're going to get through this and you're going to do something about this, you're going to need this. Like, you're going to need this knowledge because it equals application for you. So the last part of this is, so the Knights Templar, as I was explaining, they now have these Orthodox Christians. They're protecting them. They're protecting them so they can make their passage through the Holy Land. But what they're also doing is using this as the primary reason to go through these people's land and take areas like they're doing even today. But they were beat back. I'll tell the last part of the story. What happened is that they end up starting all these forts. And there's a reason for this. And you can still see a lot of the Knights Templars forts up to date. As from normal areas in Europe all the way through passage, all the way into the Holy Land, Knights Templar built forts, 100 feet thick walls on some of these forts. These are master builders. Hello. And in these forts, what they had in these forts were banks. They were also garrisons for their troops. And so as these people are going and making their passage to the Holy Land, what they're really doing is taking these Arab tribes' land. Let's just say it like it really is. These Orthodox Christians that are coming through to see the Holy Land are also attempting to occupy the area, like Israel is doing with Pakistan. It's all in Palestine. It's all a political move to attempt to basically dilute this kingdom. But because the root of the magic that these people are depending on actually comes from the country that they're trying to overthrow, Saladin, who's a chief magician, Saladin actually is the one of the great serpents. That's what the name means. Destroys these people. And for a time, though, because now you see that they're back out there again. And this time they have more ammunition, they have more magic, they have more power to try to do the same thing that they did before. And I'm not saying that either one of these religions is right or wrong. What I'm saying is, in the end, the people will be the reward. That means you. So I'm not on either one side because I'm not nobody's reward. So think about what happens after this. So now the Knights Templar not only are guiding this passage through into the Holy Land, they're also sewing up areas. They're building more Templars. They're building up more temples and fortresses. They got the Hospitallers with them. More people are migrating in to see this Holy Land where their Jesus has been born, which is a fictitious God that the Catholics created. And then the last little blow comes in. Because so many people are getting robbed by real 1001 thieves, what is it, 1001 Arabian Nights and the thieves and the marauders, those people were being subject to them so much that the Knights had a solution. If you deposit your money in wherever you started, let's say in Europe, you could then get a check, which is where we get the word check from today, from them. And then when you get further into the Holy Land, you can go into one of these fortresses and redeem money from that check, the first bank. People don't realize how crucial it is to have banks and currency, especially in the world today and in the world of antiquity. Because you can't just go out. Everything is not for free. That's the feminine cycle. That's over. They decimated that. Now everything costs. So you don't have credit cards. So you need to carry all this gold because there was no fiat currency. That didn't make any sense. The Knights Templars invented fiat currency. So before then, you had big bags of gold. And if you were going somewhere like the Holy Land, this is how you reverse engineer it. You got a month of caravan travel. So how do you, so you need camels, you need wine, you need oil, you need salted fish, you need all these different things to make this whole journey, right? So what's going to happen when you get out there and you're like maybe a little bit too far from home and the 1001 Arabian Nights roll up on you? So that's why the Knights Templar became so powerful, is because they actually created the system of not only money, but they also were working with Diaboli itself. Because also with this system of interest, they plunged many of the kings into great debt. Now, these kings really wanted to indulge their pleasures, and I'm going to speed this up. Kings indulged their pleasures. So all these scientific inventions like guns and those kind of things were bought to them by sorcerers who sold them to them by the boatload for things that really had value. Until the point where, like the relics, okay, in countries and people and, you know, people who had clear lineage and all sorts of stuff, the Knights Templar came into possession of all of that. And then they made their greatest blow of all time. They faked their death, which we call Friday the 13th, when supposedly the Catholics, who had no power compared to the Templars, send the Templars to their deaths, call an Inquisition in and torture them and get all, and in their testimony, at least they do admit in their testimonies that the Knights Templar admitted to worshiping Oannes, who is Baphomet, and actually spitting on the cross and having homosexual relationships and all these different things that they themselves admitted to. But this is all a play, because we even see in the Catholic and the Jesuit church today, all that stuff was like commonplace. So what you're really seeing is that they faked that they were condemned from society so that they can disappear. That's how the banksters disappeared. And they said the ones that you did know about were absorbed into the Knights Hospitaller. So they're even telling you, hey, they still went on. They just joined in other groups. They changed their name, and then supposedly Knights Templars never existed again until one day they rise up and they start all the secret societies that we see today. And then their spiritual arm becomes the OTO of the Golden Dawn, which practices a level of magic that is so abhorred, because what they've done is they've gone into Persia and they've grabbed the names and the mantras of entities that I cannot even give you a profile on as far as how much they don't fit into the equation of what we're doing on Earth. Meaning that they've got a hold of what we call sex magic in Tantra of a dark nature. And that's basically necrophilia, having sex with the dead. Hey, that's as far as I can go in that. But if you check it out, you'll figure out this is what's going on. And this is why now every movie you watch, somehow it always ends up taking a turn towards this direction. It's like, just watch what I'm saying. It's like you could be watching a movie and it could just be about something that you would never believe would eventually get to people with hoods on and robes and doing some kind of sacrifice. And you're just wondering, well, wait a minute, I thought I was watching something else and it turned into this. So it's actually all around. And now it's bold now. So it's coming out, it's revealing itself, and it thinks that it has a place because there's so many people who want that fame and power. Now remember, the whole thing to this is this granting of power. Remember the genie, oh, phenomenal, I'll give you power and 3 wishes, etc. So how it's getting a lot of people, look what it did to those that are in Hollywood. And you can see Beyonce's video in a tense, don't watch it, but that's as an example to, it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you get involved in that kind of thing, your brain is gone. You're so miserable. All her whole thing, and most of these people think, that's why they make all these scary movies, and it's because they're miserable. So what they thought was going to be their fame and their fortune ended up becoming a monkey's paw and became their binding. So, but this doesn't change with any aspect of what they're dealing with. So that's also why the money system, right? Because the Templars created the money after a while. And then from there, something else happened that, you know, I guess is the final part of the conversation today and why we should take this serious. Okay, so why should you take it serious? Because inside of the bank, unfortunately, there are, which is the temple, 2-dimensional imprints of agreements, we call them contracts, that one has made with that entity. That's how sneaky it got. It just created banks and it said, hey, if we let people borrow money, then they sign these papers and they say that they're basically indemnified to the bank. Like basically they owe us, but they don't know who us is. They just think us is trading on Wall Street and that us is in a suit and us looks like, you know, what they want to be, the fresh, clean, successful person. That's what they think us is. But no, us is the entity that wants to indebt souls. And that's why their system has got everyone always in the rat race. So someone asked me the other day, and I'll do the favor of answer that question because I said I was. So how, if we have to use this currency, because right now, you know, I had to transact today. How are we ever going to get out of this? It's like crawling before walking. Surely no one can wave a wand around and snap their fingers, and then all of a sudden they don't have to use their name or money anymore. I mean, unless you're ready to check out. You must not have no kids. You must not have no responsibilities. You must have accomplished true freedom. Because let's just face it, the word freedom means no home. It means nothing to be binded to. No wife, no husband, no nothing. Nothing can claim you. That's freedom. So with a person with freedom, please step up right now. Freedom is a word that we use so loosely. We don't even understand the whole universe and cosmos is in order. Freedom means you can go slam into every single planet that you want to slam into if you want to, because you don't have to abide by that order. So what we learn is that there's a power to order of the cosmos. And then what we get to do is we get to expand our orbits. That's what we're doing. We're expanding. So that way, you're expanding through your power that you're trusted with. This is your chakras, your kundalini, your energy, your cleansing, your knowledge. You're entrusted when you have that and you've utilized it properly, you can expand with it. So you're entrusted with more range. This is like giving a child more, okay, you can stay out later tonight. Okay, you can take the car. So you're giving them more range because they're becoming more mature. That's what the cosmos is doing to us. So when we become more mature, but every time if you get something, you're bragging about it. it's your power now. Now you're better than another person. You're going to end up with less than you had in the first place. So I'm going to conclude this because this is a deep conversation. It gets deep. It's semester 2. Check it out. What happens though is that I just want to talk about this last part, just so you understand that. So the conclusion of it is them in the bank, whatever. Get yourself free of it by crawling before you walk, meaning start devising yourself a system to where you can produce something that is a resource. See, when we're producing resources, that's all our ancestors did. You made something. You made bread. You made blankets. You did something because that was your gift. That was what you had in exchange for whatever someone else was going to give you for their time and energy. You see what I mean? That was the system, but it was seen as gifts, not that you owed a person. Notice the difference. Think about what I'm saying, because I'm not saying, oh yeah, you go to a barter system. No, that's not what I'm saying. It was gifts. And because everything was so abundant, if you have a lot of gifts, and I'm not talking about just sewing blankets, spiritual gifts, how much can you give to someone? A lot. Like, you're perpetual, so you can consistently give. But you also don't give without seeing the results of what you've given. Like, even if you're giving knowledge to someone and that person's running around acting ignorant, and you give them some more knowledge and then they're still acting ignorant, how much do you keep giving them before you realize that you've already given them too much? That they can chill on that for a while, go through life, get some real experiences, then they'll come back to that knowledge, see how valuable it was, and then try to make their way back to you to get what's really of value. See, this is how it works. It doesn't, there's a check and balance system in our consciousness. It didn't just come from the banks. It's just they're corrupting it by making an external form of it. And our crawling before walking is first to begin to produce a resource, each person figuring out your unique use in this whole thing, and to begin to work with that. Find your talent, work with that. If it's invention, whatever, work with that. And then finally, if you've truly succeeded, you'll be able to replace monetary systems for at least the people around you, because you can compensate them in gifts for them rendering their gifts. That's my plan, if a person wants to know it, and we'll make it open source. So, but at the same time, if you're talking about cutting off money by tomorrow and that we don't need any money right now, so then so anyone who would do that would be totally hoodwinked by, whatever was controlling their mind at that point, to think that you're going to be able to get out of this without finding the way to get yourself out of the mire, the step-by-step process.